I'm your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW, EMDR therapist, and mom of 3 daughters. Thank you for joining me. Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 62 of the Future Template Parent Podcast. I am your host, Carolyn Solo, LCSW PhD, EMDR consultant, and mom of 3 daughters. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode in which I talked about accountability and accountability groups, and why an accountability group is your secret weapon in improving your business or in building your EMDR intensive practice, and why being involved in the group that I am running starting in September can be the secrets to killing it as you move forward with an intensives practice. So listen to that if you haven't already. Today's episode, a little more clinical. I'm talking about treatment planning and the tools that you need to create an effective treatment plan for an EMDR intensive. So let's get into it. Yes, treatment planning. We all learned about it in grad school, and for many of us these glasses need to come off. They are just creating a lot of glare. In our community mental health jobs out of grad school. Of course, we learned about it as part of phase 1 of EMDR when we were trained at EMDR. But for me, EMDR training came several years after I left community mental health, a couple of years after I was already in private practice. So I had already developed a relationship to how I felt about treatment planning. Treatment planning really is essential for many reasons: for setting goals for clients and for therapists, for tracking progress in therapy, for ensuring that clients consent to treatment and what we're working on in treatment. And the therapists and the client both need to be on the same page, and treatment planning and checking in about treatment planning is great for that. The best treatment planning is a collaborative process that is in and itself therapeutic, that those sessions actually feel therapeutic. And the concrete nature of treatment planning and the goals in EMDR is another one of the reasons that I love EMDR so much. The structure of EMDR creates a framework that makes it easier to treatment plan and makes treatment plans feel like they have some weight and make sense. I feel like, for me, treatment planning in grad school and in those early jobs, maybe your community mental health setting or your insurance-based group practice, they felt like at best an annoying formality, at most something that actually got in the way of treatment. And that they weren't even really for the therapist or for the client, even though we were told that that's what it was for. It was actually for the insurance company or for the community mental health agency. I know that at my agency, if you didn't do treatment plans every 3 months, the community mental health insurance company could claw back the money that had been earned by the agency after the treatment plan was missed. So they felt scary. They felt like a punishment. And I hated those sessions, and we all avoided them and did all sorts of things to try to avoid treatment planning in kind of a thorough way. It was just something we had to do because we had to do it. So basically, I did not love treatment planning in my post-community mental health days. Well, I didn't love it in my community mental health days. And then after I left and I was starting my own private practice, I'm just going to be honest, I wasn't really doing actual formal treatment plans, even though, I know Simple Practice had that form in there for us. I was not doing them. I really just had a terrible experience with writing treatment plans in my early career, and so I just didn't do it. But there was a part of me that just knew that treatment plans had value, something more formal than just hello client, what do you want to work on? And I just kind of in a conceptual way understood that they had value, but I hadn't really come up with a way to do them in a way that felt meaningful. And I'd had all these experiences with them that just taught me that they were, optional at best and drudgery at worst, and maybe even harmful to the treatment at worst because of the way I had to do them in other settings. So when I learned about how they were conducted in EMDR in phase 1, I was excited about this. I thought the structure sounded great. I thought the function of them seemed clear. And so I was ready to incorporate them again. And as we know, the point of treatment planning is to help us achieve the best outcomes with clients. and to have our work sort of guided and directed by the best evidence-based practices. I love all of that, and I love the idea of collaboration, of this work being co-created. But I just wanted to feel like the treatment planning that I was doing was actually somehow helping accomplish those goals, and I didn't see that as being true for the way that I had learned to treatment plan, the way I had been taught to treatment plan, both in graduate school and in jobs. And frankly, I wasn't seeing a lot of people doing it, people paying more than lip service to treatment planning when they were not interacting with insurance. So thank you, EMDR, for yet another thing for me. Thank you for getting me excited about treatment planning again. So what does treatment planning in EMDR phase 1 look like? So I know you all have been basic trained, certified consultants, whatever. But basically, the way I think of treatment planning in EMDR, it just, big overview is that we're trying to think of what's the major themes or memory clusters that we are focusing on, right? And we access those in a variety of ways. You all probably learned different approaches or analogies or metaphors or techniques in basic training in terms of trying to identify those points of focus for therapy, for EMDR. Just like in any therapy client, our clients come to us because they have something that they feel like they're not getting past, right? In a phrase that I learned in my basic training, which I have said many times on the podcast and will continue to say because I just think it's so concise and great. They come to us because there's something stuck that's causing yuck. That's their presenting issue, right? And that's the starting point for our treatment plan. We take an excellent clinical history in phase 1, right? And we learn what is that sort of presenting issue. And as we look at the clinical history, we look at things that might connect to the issue that's causing distress in the present, because in EMDR, we know that the past is present and the present is future. So we're looking for what are those things that happened that created that presenting issue, right? And then we might use the float back technique. We often use the float back technique to get at those exact memories, those exact targets that we're going to use. And that's going to be our treatment plan. That target list is our initial treatment plan. And just like treatment planning in any kind of therapy, we're going to come back to that treatment plan and add things to it, change things as things come up. But that initial history taking, the presenting issue, and those first few float backs, there's our treatment plan. And of course, I know that there are therapists out there, and no shame if you are one of these people at all, who learned the trauma timeline approach or the let's list the 10 most traumatic things that have ever happened to you approach, and that's our treatment plan. I think that's not being taught as much as it used to be anymore, just because it's a lot. It can be extremely triggering to do that when you haven't built trust with someone. It's very intense. It's very overwhelming. It can send people into a really activated state, before you've done a lot of resourcing, before you've developed a really safe container for therapy. I honestly think that method is one of the reasons why EMDR has gotten a bad name in certain circles, and is seen as actively traumatizing, because people take that approach. I do not do that, especially because I work with a lot of complex clients. But even if I didn't, I'm not sure I would take that approach. It just feels really impersonal and not very organic. And my approach is certainly let's kind of follow where things go. So that is not something I do, but I still know that there are people who do, and I'm not out now discounting it. I do think that there are better ways to treatment plan that are more relational. But I think a float back with a lot of scaffolding and support in session is a lot less overwhelming of a way to treatment plan. I've even heard of people being like, okay, your homework is to go home and write down a list of your 10 most traumatic events. Yikes. I certainly would not want to do that without knowing a client well, and I wouldn't probably do that after I know a client well. It just feels like it's too ripe for things to go wrong. And yeah. So anyway, that's sort of traditionally how you treatment plan in EMDR. But how does this look different in my intensive structure? Well, as you've heard me talk about many, many times, when clients come to me for an intensive, we're working on a specific theme or a specific event, which honestly isn't that different than most EMDR clients. I would say that you rarely have a client who comes to you specifically for EMDR, knowing you're an EMDR therapist, being like, oh, things are hard, I just want someone to talk to. That does happen, but a lot of people who come to you knowing something about EMDR will be like, well, I'm coming because of this, relationship with my, abusive father. I don't know how to handle it, or my issues with drinking, or, my memories of past abuse, whatever. The people usually have something that they're coming for. Um, certainly in an intensive, and also EMDR in particular, but an intensive, it usually tends to be even more laser focused, which is what makes it so effective. One of the things. So how do I treatment plan? Well, the primary elements of treatment planning in my intensive occur in sort of three phases. One, during the 90-minute intake session that I do with clients, through their completion of my intensive client workbook, which I have them do prior to our first day, and then through my use of RETP, the recent traumatic event protocol. So just for those of you who may be coming to this episode first, it's been cool. I've been getting a lot of new listeners. I almost said new listeners, so that's fun. Is that so the way my 15-hour intensive structure works is I have a 30-minute free consult, which is just to see, are we a good fit? Is this something that the person wants to do? Explaining intensives, yada, yada. If they decide to go ahead and book, then we have a 90-minute intake, which I will do virtually, although everything else I do in person. And then I have the 3 5-hour days. So that's kind of my 15-hour structure. I guess it's really more like 17 when you think about it, if you add the intake plus the consult call. But anyway, so in that initial intake, we begin to discuss goals for treatment, which we probably talked a little bit about during the 30-minute free consult anyway. But this is when I provide clients with, they should have an overview of EMDR at this point in the intensive process. And we get a sense of like, what's this major presenting issue, this theme? Let's talk a little bit about it in more detail, because you've probably already told me about it in the 30-minute call. And then I also give them their client workbook during the intake. So this workbook has several questionnaires in it and is to be completed by the client at least 24 hours before the first long intensive day. And the questionnaires provide a ton of information for the therapist and the client also. In fact, I feel like the clients find it like a really illuminating experience in their own right, just doing the workbook. And it helps identify treatment goals for the intensive. So some of the topics covered in this workbook include identifying negative cognitions that they identify with strongly and where they think those cognitions first kind of emerged for them. That helps identify some target memories, some general developmental history, some attachment history. Again, those are also going to help me understand what is going on in their history that is informing how this theme of the intensive is playing out in the present. I have sort of a preparatory parts inventory. I help them do their own treatment goal identification. We talk about resourcing some and identify some resources. I get a sense of what are their major symptoms that they're dealing with, how frequent are these, that kind of stuff. I try to keep the workbook relatively brief, but also have it be comprehensive, which is always a balance. I'm always tweaking it. And with all that information, I then have some questions at the end that help the client kind of narrow their treatment goals. And that's what we use as an initial treatment planning guide. And so I go over the workbook with them during the 90-minute intake, then I usually email it to them. And then I have them send it back to me at least 24 hours before our first 4 or 5 hour day. So that's sort of like part one-ish of the treatment planning. So we've got the initial 90-minute intake, we've got the workbook, the client completes the workbook, they send it to me 24 hours in advance so I can review it. I take some notes. I would say it probably takes me an hour to go through the workbook after the client's completed it. I really do try to go through it thoroughly, and the client puts a lot of work into completing it, so I want to put a lot of work into reading over it, making notes, asking questions. So I would say that the first hour or two of the first intensive day is really devoted to reviewing the workbook, showing some of the resources in the workbook, and solidifying the treatment plan. Oh gosh, I'm trying to find my new recording spot in the house that we're renting, and I don't know if this is it. It's dark. I'm getting weird glare on my glasses. I need a new lamp, I guess. But yeah, so we do that, and then we start RTEP. I explain what the recent traumatic event protocol is to them, And we started. And RTEP, listen to episode 8 of the podcast if you haven't already, because I talk in huge detail about RTEP. And of course, it's something that I teach in my course, in my group program, in my coaching. So you get, if you work one-on-one with me in a VIP day, or if you join my group program, you will get my script for RTEP and my video lesson about how to use it. But anyway, RTEP is intended to help us identify kind of the hot spots that we're going to use to focus on as our targets. And so part of RTEP involves running a mental movie of the traumatic episode or event or experience. And RTEP calls it an episode because they don't want, and I really love this, it's not intended, the idea is that trauma, it's not just about what happened when it happened, it's about the aftermath and how it affects you in the present, because that can also be traumatizing. And so the episode includes everything up until the present that has happened to the person that is related to whatever the initial inciting incident was, or incidents. So, targets can be from the day before. They come into your office that you use during your intensive. They don't have to be just the thing that happened, right? So part of RTEP, sort of the early part of it, involves running what I call a mental movie of the traumatic episode. And talking through it, I call it like, give me the 10,000 foot view, right? From the start of the episode up until the present day. I always say, until the moment that you walked into my office. And to keep it contained for themselves and to protect time, I say, let's do 5 to 10 minutes, not excruciating detail. Sometimes people need to do more than that, and that's fine. You can kind of gauge that as it happens, but you don't want to overactivate people during that process, and you want to make sure that you're leaving plenty of time for the individual processing. And when they're talking through the mental movie, I have them do it with BLS, either with eye movements or with the buzzers. Most people prefer the buzzers because then they can close their eyes, but not everyone. And then, so as they're going through it, then we kind of go into the first hot spot that comes up as they're going through the mental movie. Once they've run through it once, I then say, okay, where does your mind go first? And that's our first target. And ta-da, we've treatment planned. Again, go back and listen to episode 8 and some other episodes where I talk about RTEP. But episode 8 really is the one where I go through it in excruciating, exacting. That's the word I'm looking for, detail. And that's how you treatment plan in an intensive. At times I'll do a float back if it feels particularly applicable during this phase. Not always necessary. And sometimes float backs need to happen during phase 4 processing as it feels relevant, which is kind of a cool thing that I feel like people don't talk about that much in basic training, that float backs are a tool that you can use in a lot of different points during EMDR. That EMDR is iterative. It's like sort of a spiral. You're always kind of going back and up and down and back. And that includes float backs. That includes resourcing. So this process creates a robust and thorough treatment plan for the intensive, right? Intensives are meant to get really transformational results, right? That's why people are taking time off work. That's why they're paying you the big bucks, right? Treatment planning in this way keeps the therapist and the client on track and making sure that the work that the client is paying for is actually happening. We all know how easy it is to just flit all over the place, right? But this will help you stay on track. And it feels so good to me as a clinician to know that I am finally engaging in a treatment planning process that's complete, that's robust, and it feels ethical. I do think it's ethical to do a treatment plan, and I believe in the value of it. But my community mental health days made treatment plans feel like a massive paperwork chore that was actually disruptive to the clinical relationship at times, because I had to do it on a certain day, whether the person wanted to or not. I had to do it a certain way. I'm glad intensives have brought treatment plans back into my world, in my work, that feels meaningful, in a way that feels meaningful. Oh, and a little side note, I'm excited. I'm now selling the workbook in my stand store as a one-off. You can just buy the workbook. It's of course included in my group program and my VIP day as well. You get that as part of your package. You get all my stuff when you work with me in those containers, but you can just outright buy it if you want. I'll put the link in my stand store, or to my stand store, in the podcast show notes today. And I think I'm going to increase the price pretty soon. So, because I've added a lot to it. So buy it now if you want to get it before the price goes up in a month or so. And I think I'll probably be adding other things to the stand store over time. We'll see. But yeah, check that out if you want to get your hands on it right away. So I've also been thinking about treatment planning as sort of like a curriculum for an intensive, that like therapy, I believe, as an educator, has a lot of overlap with education, right? A treatment plan is a lesson plan. It's a curriculum. You know, I'm an educator in in many areas of my professional life. This is teaching. Obviously, I believe that working with our clients is a form of teaching, and also I teach students because I have a doctorate in social work and I teach graduate students. And it's personal in my personal life too, because we parents, we're all teachers, we teach all day long. um, so I was just kind of thinking about how my group program, which I'm still enrolling for now, starting the first week of September, is essentially a treatment plan, right? We're all setting those smart, all capitals goals. You remember those, right? You talked about SMART goals and treatment planning, I'm sure. SMART, what does it stand for? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time limited, right? Here's a goal that's SMART. Book a 5K intensive before the 12-week program ends. And you can do it. That's very achievable. And we're using interventions, right, to help achieve those treatment goals, right? I know, and when I wrote treatment plans in grad school, I had to have like, here's the goal, here are the 3 steps to get there, here are the things we're going to do that will help us get there. The interventions in the group program are the lessons, the videos, the group calls, the homework exercises I'm having you do, the forum where you're talking to each other. Those are the steps to achieve your treatment goals. I've created the treatment plan you need and all the tools for your EMDR practice to get your intensive practice up and running, and not just up and running, but in a sustainable way to allow you to thrive. So my group program is kind of the treatment plan that your practice needs. It's the medicine your practice needs. So how's that for a fun little analogy? So yeah, today talking about treatment planning and intensives, why treatment planning is so important, why sometimes I have struggled with treatment planning in the past, and how EMDR intensives has made treatment planning feel really, really intentional and good again, which I'm excited about. If you're not already following me on Instagram, please do at Future Template Parent. My website is www.futuretemplateparent.com, where you can find out about all my offerings. Thank you as always for tuning in, and I'm excited to talk to you next week. Thanks, everybody. Take care.